Hello, good morning, everybody. Welcome to our Roundtable, Threats and Contributions of AI to Democracy and Society. This is a joint initiative of the Advanced Institute for Artificial Intelligence, AI2, of the Center for Artificial Intelligence, C4AI, and the South American Institute for Fundamental Science. Okay, this is just the first event of a series that intends to treat different aspects of AI, from the technical algorithms, sociological impacts, and the need for a public policy. We count on your audience in the next events, okay? Let me now introduce our moderator. Ademar Seabra is nowadays the Deputy Consul General and Brazilian Trade Commissioner in Toronto. He has been the head of Science and Technology Division of the Brazilian Ministry for External Relations and the Special Advisor to the Brazilian Minister of Science, Technology, and Innovation. He holds a PhD degree in social science and is member of the Board of Directors of the Advanced Institute for Artificial Intelligence. Okay, Mr. Ademar will take care of the stage from now on. Thank you very much, everybody, including the people that accept our invitation to participate in this roundtable. Okay.
Thank you very much, Sergio. Yes, good morning to everyone. We are very flattered and proud to have the audiences here from several countries and all parts of the world. So this is a kind of basically a Brazilian panel. So all the distinct panelists that have joined us are going to join us today. They are from Brazil, but the outreach and scope of their research and the interest of the things that we are drawing on today, they thread and scatter from different countries. I'll make a kind of just brief comments on the overall proposal of the event, and then we'll have our stars of the day. We have very distinguished, celebrated, and respected academics, policymakers, and the representatives of the industry which are here today. That is, we are going to count. We are very privileged and have the honor of counting with this the State Secretary for Innovation, Science and Technology from Rio Grande do Sul, Professor Luís Lamb, Dr. Ana Paula Appel, Professor Guy Perelmuter, and Professor Esther Colombini. I'll just relate to their curriculum briefly when the time comes for them to speak. The overall justification is plainly simple. We know that the artificial intelligence wave is taking over the world, and developed countries in Europe and the US, they are faring quite well, but there is a gap. There's a very important gap between Brazil and those countries, and we know that this gap tends to widen in the upcoming decades. So we must do something from the outset to try to curb that divide and to try to catch up with this demands. And this joint effort by AI2, C4AI, and the International Center for Theoretical Physics is a major superlative effort that we're trying to bring in the upcoming months and years, and to bring contributions from every part of the world to enhance and enrich the discussion and the intellectual production and scientific production and industrial output of AI in Brazil in this time. I have just two basic ideas before I pass the floor over to Secretary and Professor Luís Lamb. Is that from the 1930s until the end of the 60s, there were a kind of enormous and very ambitious project, which was the International Encyclopedia of Unified Sciences, which was a major effort that took 40 years to try to bring concepts, explanations, ontology of that pertaining to natural sciences to human sciences and vice versa. Of course, it was a complete flop. It couldn't go ahead. The effort was enormous, but the task was daunting. It was impossible to proceed. So, after this, that was a kind of scientific, very strong scientific interest in scientific effort at that time. But today, nowadays, it's not scientific interest that drives us to put human sciences and formal and the natural sciences together. We have pressing demands to understand and connect those sciences, because we have nowadays the law of accelerating returns. We have challenges about the impact of the use of data science and data analytics to society. And we have now the sociological situation, international situation, put like that, that we didn't have before the war, of course, which is the big tech giants, which are, well, Google, Facebook, Amazon, Apple, Twitter. They are literally playing God. And about this, there are pressing regulations, pressing regulatory demands and efforts in Europe and the US. So this also poses many difficulties and threats to society, like unacceptable biases, the threats to democracy and the tenets of democracy in long-established societies. And we have to remember that when we talk about democracy, which is in the title of this roundtable, we remember Abraham Lincoln's shorthand, which is the government of the people, by the people, and to the people. And now most people say that what we are leaving is the government of the 1%, by the 1%, and for the 1%. So, and the advent of the huge tech giants has a lot to do with that. And the current COVID-19 pandemics has made things much worse. So I think that will be a very interesting seminar that we're going to have today. I'm very excited and willing to, and waiting anxiously to have the presentation from our contributors. And we hope that as a consequence and as a result of the discussions we're having today, we'll be able to connect better. Of course, it's not an ambitious, this is just a first step, but one day we can recover the ideal and the ideals and the projects and the expectations of those who are trying to make the linkages of those big scientific fields together. With not much further ado, I invite Secretary Luís Lamb. He's the full professor of computer science and AI, Secretary of Innovation and Technology and Science and Technology from the state of Rio Grande do Sul. And he's been also formerly the Vice President of Research and Dean of the Institute of Informatics at the Federal University of Rio Grande do Sul. I'm very proud to have Professor Luís Lamb here, because I used to be his colleague at university, not at department. I used to teach at the Federal University of Rio Grande do Sul as well. So it's a particular pleasure to have here a co-fellow from the same alma mater. Professor Luís Lamb, Secretary Luís Lamb, we're very honored. Thank you very much for our time. We know that you have a pressing agenda, but everybody's really anxious to have you here. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Seabra. I will share a few of my images here, and let's see if we can have a better, let me see, just 1 second.
Yeah, no, we hear and listen to you very clearly. You're quite clear and well.
Okay, sorry. Oops.
Very nice. No, take your time. Yes, that's great. That's good.
No, it's okay. It's okay. No, there are way too many, as usual, there are way too many windows over here.
Yeah.
Okay, can you see that? Yeah. Okay. And sometimes I say that we're living in a new period that we can compare to what Raphael depicted in his famous School of Athens, that we're finally seeing when he the role and the impact of the big techs, and no matter what economic or social impact they have, they are based on knowledge. Everything they do is based on knowledge, and this picture illustrates what happened a few centuries ago in terms of our human history. And we can also see now that the impact of knowledge is as big as it's never seen before. We never seen that before. And as you mentioned, I've always been an academic. I am a professor of computer science and AI. I've been doing AI for a long time. And about 20 years ago, it was seen as science fiction, and people didn't take it too seriously, and now we are here discussing the impacts that this particular field has on society as a whole. And another important point that we have to make is that this year, particularly in the South, I mean, over here, it has changed a little bit our perception about what's important, about the value of science, the value of technology, and the value of knowledge. We're confronting a global situation where the only tools that we have for solving this problem is using science. So it's becoming more and more clear that every field, every human activity is now depending on the role of scientists, the role of the transformation of science into deployable technologies. And this has a lot of impacts over our lives. And it's important to note also that I see this particular field of AI and this particular time that we are living as something in a way also connected with some of the breakthroughs about the same kind of paradigm change we've had in the past with the knowledge revolution, the scientific revolution. Bacon played a key role by developing the scientific method. Of course, he was not the sole responsible for that, but in a way, by putting the knowledge at the center of the power strategy, of the economic strategy, he's saying, and this illustrates a few of the things that happened in the next centuries over, for instance, the British Empire. So we are living in an era of empires of knowledge, more than empires of anything else, of territorial expansion or power expansion. Even this concepts of domination, they are based on knowledge, they're based on technology and domination, and they are based on the way that people are able to make the translation of science to technology and technology to the market and so on. And if one looks at the extension of this empire that was the largest we had over history, we can also never forget that underlying this power, there was a huge, there was a huge amount of science, a lot of knowledge being produced, and several of the concepts of the ideas of the machinery that we have today was produced by several scientists that worked for or under the auspices of these empires. The same thing we see today in terms of the dominant powers that we have, be the Eastern powers. And as you mentioned in your opening statement, today the big companies, the big techs, they are making this transition that we had in the transition from the 19th to the 20th century, where oil became the gold of the 19th and the 20th century. And now what we're seeing today is that those who have power and those who have economic influence and those who can draw the avenues and see and define the perspectives and define the future that we have now are the companies that base their knowledge and base their businesses, their core business around knowledge, around technology, around innovation. And of course, AI is one of the key technologies that underpins this change that we are seeing. And it's quite interesting to note as well as a historical fact that perhaps we should pay more attention to what's going on in the world. And one parallel that I draw here is that in 2006, 2007, in less than a year, we have two very significant facts, at least from a Brazilian perspective. Around that time, we announced that our oil company, Petrobras, had found ways of exploiting oil in deep sea waters, and that this would lead us to a new economic boom and a new perspective in terms of social implications, social benefits to our population. At the same time, something that may seem less significant was the announcement by Apple of its smartphone. And this smartphone just illustrates this new era that we're living now, where this kind of company is worth 20 times in terms of market capitalization, the value of a traditional oil corporation. So this shows that over the last 30 years, we had at least two very significant technological changes that changed the world for better or worse for the world that we are seeing today. The first one during the 90s was undoubtedly the impact that the web had over the use of the internet by offering a much easier platform for people to access and use technologies and use digital technologies. So the internet, of course, has over 50 years, but the web brought something that was very important to the use of computers and to make people more connected, was a much easier, and here I'm making an oversimplification, a much easier way of interacting with computers, and billions of people started using computers on a daily basis. And this allowed for the big techs you mentioned before, for a new wave in the way that people interchange and change connections. It took it made economic science to pay attention to what was happening in this new so-called virtual world that today dominates the transactions in the service section, in e-commerce, and in several other doing business. In the 90s as well, there was a significant point, some significant historical point, that was the time when back in 1997, when Garry Kasparov, then the world champion, the world chess champion, confronted the IBM Deep Blue system. And this kind of sparkled attention back to AI and back to what machines could be in terms of being smarter or being more adequate than humans in fulfilling some needs and to executing and doing some tasks. Of course, people were not at that time very confident that AI was becoming what is now, what is today, what brings us to this debate now. But when we look now and we back forward to 2020, we can see exactly what you mentioned. This data is already a bit outdated. It's the data from the second quarter, which shows here like companies like the big techs, as you mentioned, Alphabet, Microsoft, Amazon, and so on, with market caps well over 1 trillion, and some of them are already reaching $2 trillion in terms of market cap. And as Churchill said in the 1940s, when he was giving several speeches and when he was in the United States to gather support for the war effort, he gave a series of talks at universities as well. In one of these particular talks that he gave at Harvard University, when asked about the future perspectives of the British Empire, of the empires that always ruled the world, he stated that the empires of the future would be the empires of the mind. And these empires that we are seeing today are much more similar or resemble this idea or this prophecy that he stated way back in the 40s. And what we are seeing today in the 2020s, not only in terms of data science, not only in terms of particular fields that we associate more with technology, with computing, with AI, are companies like SpaceX that are returning or restarting the US space program. And of course, we know that SpaceX is also owned by one of tech entrepreneurs that also owns and makes several efforts towards automating, for instance, the car industry, for delivering new cars that are more energy efficient and also that can be autonomous. So this technology is pervasive. This technology affects every sector of our economy. And then, at the same time, economists and sociologists and political scientists are also paying attention to the impact that this new wave, this new technologies, this new economics that's developing in the 20th centuries, particularly from the 2020s, 2010s, the impact of technology, the impact of science over our lives. And this also brings about new concepts in terms of sustainability, in terms of social responsibility, and several economists, including Mariana Mazzucato, they have been defending this point that the ESG values or ESG predicates or ESG characteristics of businesses, they will be defining in terms of economic perspective. So ethics, social responsibility, environmental concerns, governance, responsible governance, and a much more responsible businesses will also have and will play a key role in terms of the future of economics that we'll see over the next decades. And however, in order to consider these values and consider these responsibilities that we have now, we also have to learn to normatize, learn to regulate, and learn to live with these new technologies. It's the first time in history, perhaps, that we will have to deal with things that happen at a much faster speed, at much faster acceleration, at much faster social adherence, and we have to confront things that we've never seen in such a scale. For instance, here I illustrate several of the impacts of AI over our lives. AI and the digital technologies have now a massive impact in the political arena. Everyone knows that over the last democratic elections in several countries, in every country in the Western world, technology has played a key role in terms of influencing the behavior of large groups, of social groups, of large corporations were pretty much involved in this process and pretty much received the attention of voters, of analysts, of social science, of political sciences, because of the key role they had, not only in influencing the behavior of the voters, but also influencing the results that the elections had. At the same time, one has to take into account the economic value, the economic impact that these companies had. And here, one of the headlines I bring here is from 2019, November 2019. In one single day, Alibaba has topped 38 billion in terms of revenue on a single day. That was in the Singles Day 2019. And this is pretty much important because in exactly the same week, which was the second week of November 2019, Petrobras, our oil company here, they sold the access. They made a public call for selling the access to some areas for oil exploitation in Brazil, and the values that they acquired for oil exploitation for several decades were much smaller than this value that Alibaba managed to get in a single day. So this is the new world that we have to pay attention. And of course, there are several ethical and social concerns about the consequences. Notwithstanding, we are also seeing, and we cannot close our eyes to that, is that there is now this dispute between the Western world and China for who is going to be the leading power, the one who calls the shots in terms of AI techniques, AI deployment in several fields. And this is particularly hard to tackle as well, because AI has a lot of implications over people's lives, and the Western regulations and Eastern regulations in terms of the legal systems, in terms of the ethical values of the people, in terms of cultural differences, in terms of the way, in the end of the day, the way that we see individual and social responsibility with respect to the world. And even the armed force, the U.S. armed forces have expressed publicly these concerns about the Western world becoming behind or being behind the developments made in the Eastern world. And this has a lot of social implications, geopolitical implications, and political implications, and also in terms of the geopolitical balance in the world. Also in terms of economics, in 2019, the key topic discussed at the Davos seminar, organized by the World Economic Forum, which is the leading organization in terms of economic strategy, as we all know. And the key factor and the key area discussed, one of the top theme discussed in Davos last year was the social implications of AI. And in this report published by McKinsey, it is said that it was almost impossible to walk into any place, any room in Davos and not to hear someone talking about the impacts of AI over several economic sectors, over political decisions, discussing the impact of AI technologies in terms of privacy, in terms of responsibility, in terms of shareholding and stakeholder responsibility, about data ownership, and all the aspects that we hope that we can talk a little bit today over here. Also, if one analyze how the countries are doing in terms of developing AI strategies and developing AI for good in their countries and AI to accelerate better economic perspectives, we can see that some countries have started a little bit earlier, way back in 2017. Some countries like Canada or Singapore or even the United Arab Emirates developed national strategies because they saw that AI would be an enabling technology for several fields, for several economic activities, with a lot of social impacts and even political impacts, and it would influence the political spectrum in every country, and even in bilateral negotiations. And one of these countries, which is the United Arab Emirates, they even created this Ministry of AI. It was the first country that created a political position that responds directly to the head of state or the head of government. And this shows the impact of this particular field, the field that we're discussing today, in terms of the economic impact that they have in several countries. And also these countries developed more sophisticated R&D strategies, national strategies, so that AI can have a better association and can be of the benefit of other technological fields and have way better economic competitiveness in terms of the international arena. And several other influential consultants, the big techs, the big fives, better to say, they have made several projections in terms of economic impact over the next decades, over the next 10 years. And for instance, PwC published this well-known report that way back in 2017, they projected that by 2030, the global economic impact of AI would be around 15.7 trillion. And these projections, they are being revised and they're being studied again since 2017, because some people see that given the acceleration in terms of the digital transformation that we had due to the pandemics, the global impact of AI and the global impact of the use of data in terms of changing the way people do businesses will be even larger. Also, we have to see in a much bigger perspective, in a much larger perspective. I'm not going to tell a full history of AI over here, is that over the last 150 years, we've seen several efforts towards automation, starting, of course, in the 19th century. Charles Babbage, Ada Lovelace, they are, let's say, the signposts. They are the key figures that represent this era of the starting of computer science, the starting of computer programming, and so on. We have figures like Alan Turing, of course, that was highly influential over the Second World War. It was already the first time that the cyber war played a key role in defining the result of global confrontation. Even the historians, and even it's said that Winston Churchill said the work at Bletchley Park reduced the war by 2 years, or what means is that even already at that time, 60, 70 years ago, 80 years ago, sorry, we had the impact of the digital technologies changing the global perspective and changing the result of a war. And when we come to this century, of course, it's not a century where we are seeing a physical confrontation. The war arena has changed to much more to a cyber arena where countries and companies and organizations, they are playing a different kind of game. And this game is clearly now based on knowledge, clearly based on the power of machines gathering that data and using this data in much better, in more sophisticated, in more, let's say, much more impactful way, so that every data, every kind of activity, including human reasoning, including human cognition, is now being transferred to machines and to AI. And this started by this seminar is happening here because about 10 years ago, we had the so-called deep learning revolution, where Jeff Hinton and other collaborators, and Jeff Hinton is in the same family tree as George Boole. He happens to be the great-great-grandson of George Boole, who defined Boolean logic that we use today for in several concepts in computer science, electronics, digital electronics, and so on. And Jeff Hinton came up with several efficient algorithms that changed several fields, including image processing, language translation, vision, robotics, and so on. And over the last 10 years, this picture is from 2016, we have seen several developments of AI that have astonished the industry, have astonished scientists, and have reached and gathered media attention, both in the academic perspective, but also in terms of mainstream media, by showing that several AI techniques could impact human life and could defeat humans in several other activities and could have a much better performance than we do in several of domains that we consider as human domains, in terms of taking decisions, in terms of gathering knowledge, in terms of developing way better ways of solving problems. And also, more recently, not only in terms of gameplay, in terms of the traditional ways computer science is used, we've seen over the last month these new developments in terms of AI contributing to solving very important, extremely important problems in biology. This particular problem is known as the three-dimensional protein structure prediction problem. And this particular problem in biology, the solution of this particular problem can lead to several results and several impactful results in terms of drug discovery, in terms of the development of drugs for cancer, for several other fields, in terms of identifying protein structures, and in a way that's way more efficient than the way people do in research labs and using the usual techniques that involve a lot of human effort and a lot of experiments in laboratories. So in this way, we have the social impacts of AI in the political arena, in the social arena, that leads us to several ethical discussions, several needs for regulation, for change in terms of legislation. But however, we can also consider and see that this technology has potential to make very important scientific breakthroughs that can only contribute to the much better health systems and global discoveries, and that will have a global impact in everyone's lives. But finally, yes, I'm wrapping up.
Okay, great.
I'm wrapping up. So in terms of AI, ethics and explainability is a key point as well. Even in our research group, we have identified some issues, some concerns that we have to address. The issue of biases, the issue of representability, the issues of letting people out. And this has been the subject of interest of several leaders in the AI community. Even the AI Index, which is perhaps the most influential AI document published every year, one of the key factors, one of the key issues tackled last year in the AI Index was the issue of ethics. And it's true that so far, over the last 50 years, ethics has not been a great concern of researchers in terms of AI impact. Researchers were much more concerned about the impacts of the technological, the efficiency of their algorithms and their systems. But now that AI has reached mainstream economics, there is a need for regulating what's going on in terms of research. And finally, to conclude here, I know I'm way over time, AI Ethics and AI Ethical Conference, they started to gain traction. And I hope that over the next few years, we are going to be able to solve several of the issues that some of the AI tools have presented. For instance, misclassification using face recognition systems, machine translation that still shows some gender bias and some issues with respect to languages, with minority languages. And also, we need to develop a much better semantics so that the systems that we develop, including large language models and other applications that are extremely important, should have a much more safer, explainable models, much better formal semantics, so that people can gain trust in AI systems. So I have to stop here. I could go on for a longer time, but I finalize saying that I'm very excited to be here, and I'll be open to questions after that. Thank you.
That's great. Secretary Luís Lamb, Dr. Luís Lamb, Professor Luís Lamb, thank you very much for your enlightening, your enriching, and overarching presentation. 2 points I'd like to emphasize. You mentioned the empires of the mind from Church, which was a great thing, to couple with the concepts that we have nowadays of the intangible economy, the knowledge economy, wayless economy, so all of the things that brings lots of great promises to humankind, as it is, for instance, what you mentioned, the two-dimensional protein structure problem. But of course, we have many hindrances and traps and those threats are how the use of artificial intelligence can shape preferences, beliefs, dispositions, inclinations, so on and so forth. So you presented quite clearly and very well convincingly the great dichotomy which is between utopia and dystopia, which can be brought by AI. Thank you so much. Please, now we have the great honor as well of having Ana Paula Appel. She was elected the Master Inventor in 2016. Is a kind of, she is a patent powerhouse, which perhaps is most thing that Brazil is desperately needing. So she has 25 patents, which are deposited in USPTO in the US, and is a member of the IBM Academy of Technology. So she has your doctorate, your PhD in computer science at the, as you say in English, in the University of São Paulo, the Institute for Mathematics and Computing Science. And you are an expert as well in complex network mining, among many other things that you not have time to say here, but the honor is proportional to your curriculum. Dr. Ana Appel, please go ahead.
Thank you very much for the invitation. So, nice speech of Professor Luís Lamb. So, I think when we start to develop technologies, I like to think that nobody wants to develop something to harm us. So people try to develop something to increase, to do good, or to the technology be good. And we think that, I think that during the pandemic, we could see that the use of technology increases so much. So we need to put kids to learn by virtual class and to use softwares. Most people, a lot of people need to learn how to do online shopping and so on. So we have this large amount of people who start to use technology that I think that's good. One thing at least was good for this whole chaotic situation. And we start to be very dependent of the technology. So, and with this, we start to give data to this company. So people have social networks, so they give data like to Facebook, to Twitter, to other big techs. You have like email, you have a vacuum cleared robots that map your house. You have cell phones that trace where you're going, if you're leaving your house, if you're not. So people start to be very dependent of this. But the concern of what type of data are you giving to this company starts to appear just like now. Because most people start to see that when you go to social network, you can get some recommendation about news, and this news could have bias, and this could influence your voting. And we saw this a lot of this about the past elections. We start to be concerned if people are using your data to do a lot of other stuff. But I can say that we still have a lot of to do about this, because most of the people still don't know what this data could be done for harmless, for example. So when you go to the pharmacy and you give your data to get some kind of discounts, but you don't know what this pharmacy will do with your data, if they will sell your data to a drug company to see what type of medication you were having. But this was a long time ago being doing. So for instance, like people are concerned with bias now because you saw death penalty being made by algorithm, or you have like credit gave by another algorithm. But in the past, you can say that, for instance, insurance from car, when you fill the form, they have a bias. They say, oh, if you're women, if you're less than 25 years old, so you have to pay more because there are high risk of your collision, or depend of the place of you live, you have more way to lose your car, to be assaulted. So one good thing of technology is to make people think about this bias that's inherent from person. When you see an algorithm being racist or gender discrimination, you saw this based on data, and this data was produced by banks, by other companies. So one thing that we need to start to think is that these algorithms bias start to make us think that how can we fix this bias? It's not just the algorithm. You were saying that the problem is the algorithm, and the problem are the data. You need to take care of the data. Of course, that you can have problems in your model, but basically because of the data is showing that this bad decisions were made in the past. So as Professor Lamb told in the end, so we have now there's attraction for AI ethics. So the same way that we need to learn, you have to have a certain age to drive a car, you have rules to drive a car, the people that can have a gun need to be licensed or something like that. We need to have certain types of rules and ethics and concerns about the use of data, of AI models, and so on. So we need to start to think how to regulate that, because we saw that this can influence our behavior and behavior of the people. And when you do like a bad recommendation for a credit for a person, for instance, you are affecting the life of this person. So this person will not get money to buy a house, or if you're giving a bad prediction about a treatment, this could be a problem for this person. But we also need to think that the advance of the use of the data and the artificial intelligence made a lot of good things. So we have, for instance, examples of use case of using IoT to save animals in Africa, rhinos, for instance, to prevent of them being killed. We have advancing in the vaccine productions. We have the drug discovery accelerating. We are now seeing companies like in 5 predictions of IBM to reduce the production of CO2, to capturing the CO2, how to avoid to have more green environments. To food trust, how can you trust the process of the food? How could you certify of that? But when you advance one point, for instance, like deep learning, you saw people doing other things, like, for instance, deep fake. So this will be common in computer science. We will advance one part and somebody goes there and use that for another stuff, and now we need to discover how to identify this deep fake. The same thing with fake news. So, we saw some characteristics and to how to identify this fake news. Now people start to invent a new way to spread this kind of rumors. I think we need to have to inform people. People need to know and learn that the data is personal. What you're using with your data, from who you are giving your data. So when you sign for a social media, so social network, or for an app, you need to learn which type of data you are giving to this person. And people start to think this now. So when you get like a recommendation, people start to think, wow, why am I getting this? So why this software is recommending me this? What's funny, because my mother is 84 years old, and some years ago she started to learn how to use like a tablet, mainly because she lives in São Carlos and I'm living in São Paulo, and because of my daughter, to see my daughter. And yesterday she was commenting with me. So I was watching something on YouTube, and they start to recommend some very strange things to me, and things that has a name that make me want to click and watch that, but I was think that this name was so stranger that I didn't click because I was afraid of that. And she and this perception, I think that's interesting, and we need to start to inform even little kids in the school to start to use this in more a conscious way. So have conscience of what you are doing, and we need to have laws. We start to think this in the past about the robots. So, oh, because of the movies, if I have a robot that will kill me, or a car, autonomous car that you kill a person on the street, what will be the decision? But there is other types of models that are intrinsic to us now to give this data. Maybe I want a vacuum cleaner that will clean my house, but I don't want to give the map of my house to that company. So I want to have the service, but I don't want to give my data. And there is a very common phrase though. When you get something that's free, it's because your data is the coin that you're giving to this company. So I think that's a point that you need to think, and the governments need to start to think how to work with companies to prevent this. So we have like now Europe is very concerned about that and trying to give a lot of stop companies, big tech companies about this. One good thing is that IBM is very concerned about this. So we have like research in fairness and AI ethics, and we are concerned of the models. IBM always have like a very clear that the data is from clients. We not use data from clients to improve our models and sell to other clients. So we need to have like companies more responsible for that, because bad recommendations and bad use of the data can be harmless for entire nation. So we need to start to think how we could prevent this. And I think we need these laws, start to think how to improve these laws that are very antique, and start to think how we can inform people, even the little ones. They start using this technology. So movies, recommendations, videos recommendation, message, and like if you're spreading fake news on purpose, this could be a crime. So you are trying to do a bad thing for other people. You're trying to harm us. So we need to stop that. We need to prevent that for harmless nations and governments and so on. But we need to think that the technology is now you'll be more and more using. So we have like personal assistants in our home. So we have the user need to have the control of they want to give to this company or not. So sorry. I will wrap up, so I know I'm not taking time for everyone. And I think it's very good to have like a round table to discuss these, and we need to have this flag in everything that we do in our research, and think that black box models and the use of data, we need to do this in a more responsible way. So thanks for the invitation.
Oh, thank you very much, Professor Ana Paula. Thank you very much. It was a great presentation and brilliant indeed. Brilliant in one very concrete, particular aspect, because you brought very meaningful and striking examples on how the bad use of AI can jeopardize and can affect negatively people's lives. And in this aspect, your presentation, your participation was a true working agenda on how to fix those biases. So we thank you very much for that, and also for the idea that the bias is not, say, in the algorithm or in the model itself, but the bias is in those who produce the big data and how they manage and how they transform that in models as well. So this is a clear working agenda in terms of the micro level of the examples, and also on how to compatibilize, to make compatible human sciences again, and AI and computer science for the benefit of users and citizens. Thank you so much. Now, without further ado, I'll just go ahead and proceed with Professor Guy Perelmuter, our next speaker and panelist. I'll make an exception, and I will not refer to Professor Perelmuter's curriculum. I'll tell a personal story. I was in my early 30s and living in London. And at that time, I just turned on the television and I was watching a very famous and very popular TV news from, I think, BBC Two in London, which was called Future Planet. And then I was just watching the program, and there came a whole news about the scientific development, the computer development that was being carried on at the Pontifical University of Rio de Janeiro, PUC Rio de Janeiro, where Professor Guy Perelmuter is from, and telling all the wonders of the new model and system to enable blind people to read and to print. So it was almost half an hour telling about these wonders of the young scientist prize that he received. I don't know if Professor Perelmuter knew that, but it was one of the great moments in which I was proud to be Brazilian, very proud to be Brazilian at the time. One of the great moments was that. So thank you very much for that. And now it's a great pleasure to be with you some 20 years or so later in this panel. Professor Perelmuter, go ahead, please. My great pleasure and my own.
Thank you so much, Dr. Seabra. It's a pleasure to see you and to hear this heartwarming story. Very happy to be here. Thank you very much for the invitation. It's an honor to share some of our thoughts regarding this very important theme with all of you. So if we could put up the presentation I'd like to speak a little bit about the so important topic of how artificial intelligence is now bringing so many challenges to the forefront of all of our discussions. And I'd like to echo what Dr. Lamb said in his presentation. I have also studied AI back in the 90s, and it was still a very specific niche of research. I don't think anyone could have foresaw the impact and the overflow of applications that now we are going to see throughout society in something that is literally irreversible. At this point in time, there's no way to put the genie back in the bottle. What we have to do now is to create the guardrails, to create the rules, to create the processes that will make sure that we can drive this powerful force to make the changes and to make the advancements in our society that all of us so desperately need. So the presentation that I have put together tells a little bit of a story. So we'll begin talking about predictions, then data, which seems to be the overarching theme. Both Dr. Lamb, Dr. Appel spoke about data quite significantly. Then we're going to talk about social networks, finally AI, the threats and the contributions. And I think the most important thing for us to recognize is that we as human beings, we're not very good at predictions, right? And there are plenty of reasons for that, and we can certainly discuss this in the future. But if you take the writings of J.C.R. Licklider, which back in the 60s wrote probably one of the most important books in computer science called Libraries of the Future, he said that humans we typically tend to overestimate what we can do in 12 months, but we always underestimate what we can do in 5 to 10 years. And this has been true again and again and again. And I've put together a few of those predictions just to illustrate this point. So you can see that telephones were considered not to be a serious means of communication by folks at the Western Union. We have, of course, the airplanes that people like Lord Kelvin thought that, would be impossible to achieve because they were heavier than air. We have the automobile, where people very close to the birth of this industry felt it could be just a fad, that the horse would be here to stay. We have, of course, even computers, right? With one of the most important CEOs of IBM Corporation, Thomas Watson, famously said that the world had the market for maybe 5 computers. And even the FCC in the US, they argue that satellites would hardly become useful for enabling communications or telecommunications. So if you take into consideration all those predictions, we can ultimately see that no matter how qualified, no matter how smart, no matter how knowledgeable you are of a specific field, it is very hard for you to be able to project what's going to happen in the future. But now we have a little bit of a different scenario, because now we have machines that are literally trained to predict the future. This is what AI does, right? It takes huge amounts of data and it tries to predict what's going to happen next. And therein lies a ton of risks, as we're going to see in the next few minutes. So let's begin with data, right? Data is, of course, the key ingredient for any AI system, right? Any AI system in the planet, it needs to have data. It needs to be fed with data. And if we look at technology adoption, and this is a chart that shows technology adoption in the US, you can see clearly that over the last few years, the time it takes for a specific technology to be adopted by a large percentage of households is increasingly shorter. So if you look at electrical energy that took decades to achieve full adoption, you look now at tablets and smartphones and things that we have seen only recently, they have now reached 75, 85, 95% of adoption in the US. And this means that, and this is, I guess, something that we can completely extrapolate to the rest of the world, right? It's not just the US. This is something happening worldwide. If you look at the amount of data that is produced now, we'll look at the growth of the communication between not only humans, which you can see in the right-hand side with the internet protocol traffic growing by leaps and bounds year by year by year. You can also look at the machine-to-machine communication volume, which is something that we should absolutely keep track of, because we now have machines taking decisions and making assumptions on their own. We are building such a vast, interconnected, and complex web of communications between not only people, but also between machines, that you have those machines exchanging information and building new scenarios and putting forward new scenarios on our behalf, which is, again, something we'll talk about a little bit later. And just to make it very clear, we're talking exabytes per month here. This is an astoundingly large amount of information, an incredibly large volume of data. And every single year, you can find this all over the internet. There's a short summary of how does the world use online their own 60 seconds. So at every single minute over 2020, this is the amount of data or the amount of actions that we have seen people perform over Twitter or Instagram or your favorite email tool or your smart assistant or over Zoom calls and so on and so forth. So these numbers, if you keep track of those numbers, they have been growing consistently. And this leads us directly to the challenge of social networks. And this all ties in very nicely into our discussion here about the threats and contributions of AI to society. We have now effectively more than 2.5 billion people that are actively using Facebook. We have 2 billion people using WhatsApp and YouTube. We have north of 1 billion people using Messenger. And this list is only going to grow because as internet, telecommunications, and access to information becomes more pervasive, there will be more people jumping into those networks and building information. And this leads us to a first very, I think, important consideration, which is something that seems to be straight out of science fiction, right? There was an episode that was presented in the English TV series Black Mirror called Nosedive. And in that episode, the main character, she lived in a society where your social status was measured by a 5-star rating that was given to you by your peers, your colleagues, your family. And depending on your status, you would have access to better or worse types of services. Now, if you cut that to 2014, the Chinese government, they announced the public reputation system, which ultimately is this, right? You will score points if you obeyed traffic regulations, if you did community services, if you were a good payer of your bills, and depending on the quality of your contacts. And depending on your score, you'd be able to rent a car without putting down the deposit. You'd be able to avoid the larger lines at the airports, and you would get benefits to make your life easier. So we're living in a world that the information that we are provided, information we're producing, as Dr. Appel just said, to the large technological applications that service or should service, this data is going to be used and is going to build a profile out of which a number of conclusions and a number of decisions could be made. There's a famous story of one fintech company that will define if you will or will not receive a loan depending on the type of phone you're using to make the request, how much battery you have left, where you live, and how fast you're typing data. So there's absolutely room for analysis over every single scrap of information that we can provide and produce. And this is going to be used by intelligent systems. And this has value, right? This has a monetary value. If we look at the Metcalfe's law, a network is worth the number of members in it. So it's in every single social network's best interest to have as many people participating there, because as we can see, the number of connections, it will grow according to this formula, depending on the number of participants that are in that specific network. And this is something that has been proven to be relatively accurate. There are some very interesting studies being carried out both in China and the US looking into that. So the social networks are able not only to analyze behaviors and growth patterns, but also to study how they can or should charge for those particular advancements. So this means that in this world where everybody's connected, where there's a huge amount of data being produced, and where there's a specific effort to make predictions and forecasts, we're living in what is now effectively a completely new paradigm, right? Most of us, when we learn how to program, we used 2 sets of inputs and 1 output, right? In goes rules and data, and out comes answers. Your programming, it's supposed to take data, apply rules to this data, and tell you the answers. But right now, with machine learning, the world is different, right? You have answers, you have data, and then you let the machine produce the rules. So to use a very simple example, in the past, if you wanted to program a computer to recognize a dog, you'd have to put in rules that help the computer to identify if a certain object, if a certain photograph was effectively a dog. But this is not a trivial task. We know that computers are great for doing math and doing calculations, but they're not great at what we are specifically built for, we human beings, which is pattern recognition and extrapolations. So now machine learning takes this feature where instead of you having to program specifically, this is how you recognize a dog, you change the problem, right? You say, here are 1 million pictures of dogs, create your own internal representation of how you can recognize a dog, and then when I show you dog number 1,000,001, you'll be able to recognize it all by yourself. And this is the exact model that is being used for AI to identify tumors in exams, to identify if an X-ray of a specific patient does show signs of pneumonia or COVID-19 or something like that. And this is what makes AI now so different. If you take data and you take answers, the AI models are going to build the reasoning behind how you get there, how you got there, right? So this industry was built, it's one of the very few science fields where you have a very specific date of birth, and Dr. Lamb mentioned he was not going to make tell the story of AI, and I'm not going to do that either. But this was basically the summer of AI when it was born. You have Dr. Rochester from IBM, Dr. McCarthy, Dr. Marvin Minsky, and of course the great Claude Shannon. They all got together with a few other luminaries to what they thought would be a summer where they would advance AI by leaps and bounds. And of course, the timeline that AI took to become what it is now today is pretty different, right? We had a couple of winters in the process of building AI as a major force for good, and as we have been witnessing also for bad. And when we decided that we wanted to study this, all of us, all my esteemed colleagues in the panel and the community around us around the world, I think all of us thought that there was something very powerful about you translating the potential of the human brain, of human intuition, of human pattern recognition capabilities into a way where you could bring that and unlock that in machines that are much better suited for doing calculations and processing millions of pieces of data at the same time. So much so that if we look at the most important contest for image recognition out there, the ImageNet project, if we look at just the last, the 7 or 8 years depicted in this slide, you can see that the error rate between a computer system recognizing accurately a specific image between 2010 and 2017, it has collapsed by a factor of 10. And now you have systems that can recognize images with as good an accuracy as us human beings, and sometimes better. The human rate we're seeing here, the error rate, that we're seeing here to evaluate the accuracy of a specific image now is better than what we as humans can achieve. So all this narrative between predictions and data and building AI as a science and using AI in the context of social networks, that brings a very dangerous scenario for the future, which is the threat part of this presentation. But of course, there are a lot of contributions, right? And again, we alluded to this. I think Dr. Lamb alluded to this. Just recently, a couple of weeks ago, Nature reported that DeepMind was able to crack the protein folding problem, which is basically out of a chain of amino acids, being able to define how the 3D model of a specific protein is going to look like. And this is huge. And of course, the news cycle now is, and as it should be, filled with news about coronavirus. But this advancement, the protein folding problem being sorted out, is just absolutely dramatic, and it's going to bring a ton of benefits for us and for the society as a whole. Another benefit that we cannot be turn a blind eye to is, of course, the development of the natural language processing techniques, because now our computers, our personal assistants, our phones, they can interact with us, the algorithms, to make the processing of our language with the nuances, with irony, with cheeky remarks, with mischievous remarks. All that are incredibly tough problems that have been involving linguistics, and neuroscientists, and of course, computer engineers over decades. And now we're seeing some amazing advancements, so much so that in certain parts of the US, if you are talking to an AI system, the AI system has the legal obligation to disclose it is not a person, because it is so natural, it feels so human. And we can see that online. There's a famous demo that the CEO of Google presented in their annual meeting, I guess a couple of years ago, where a user is making a reservation in a beauty parlor and in a restaurant, and the user is actually a machine who is talking to a human in the other end of the line. And it's an amazing example of how natural and how fluid these interactions happen. At the same time, we start to delve into a world where a lot of innovations become at least contentious, right? If we look at this slide, these are a number of photos of people that were created using adversarial networks, right? It's a technology that has been gaining a ton of importance recently. One of the many techniques for you to implement artificial neural networks algorithms. And if you look at this image and you try to find which one of these photos represent an actual person that exists in our world, the answer is none of them, right? These are all figments of the imagination of an algorithm that is taking data, millions of faces that it was able to scrape around the web, and create new hyper-realistic faces out of that. And you can think of a world where you're going to be interacting with a virtual assistant, and they're going to be in your screen, much like I am now, but you have no assurance if it's an actual person or if it's an algorithm. And at the same time, those areas where AI is building its reach and it's extending its reach are pretty much all over the place, right? We've spoken about that. Dr. Lamb and Dr. Appel spoke about that. We're looking at that in transportation, in robotics, in finance, industry, safety, life sciences, of course. There is a whole lot of applicability to AI, which became effectively like electricity and like the microprocessor, a general purpose technology, right? And general purpose technologies, they are not vertical, they are horizontal. They are occupying a space in every single domain that you can think of. And the risks that this brings are, of course, prejudice, the fact that AI normally is very hard to explain. To open the black box of AI to get explainability, how you got from A to B, is not trivial. And of course, the challenge that a lot of people have been discussing, which is general AI, right? We now live in a world of specific AI, where there is AI designed to evaluate loans, or to play chess, or to adjust your photographs to make sure that the background fits your parameters. But there are fields of study where you're trying to build an AI that can learn on itself, on its own, and that can ultimately be all-knowing. And this is something that divides scientists in almost two very different groups. The scientists that don't believe general AI is going to happen at all, and the people that think that the scientists that believe that this is going to happen over the course of the next few decades. And we can certainly evaluate which one of those can be more expected, and we can talk about that in the future. But as we talk about prejudices, there was this important paper published in 2016 at Princeton University about how prejudice is not even a problem of the data set. Prejudice may come a step before that, which is in the actual building blocks of the language, right? They used 1 trillion English words as their input data, and they verified that a ton of those words actually carried prejudice in and by themselves. So it's even more difficult and more challenging than we originally thought. It's not just about us training AI with the right data set for recognizing faces or for recognizing discourse. It's about us being very conscious of how words themselves carry those meanings. And if you look at the words and the power of social networks and combine those two, we're going to look at a study developed in 2018 by a group of MIT researchers that took 126,000 news articles, and they showed that the truth articles, the truth pieces of news reached sometimes 1,000 people. But the fake news, the articles that were just exploring the ignorance or the rage or the frustration of the population, they were able to reach easily 10,000 people. So the ratio at the end of the day, on average, is 6-to-1, meaning it was 6 times more likely for a fake piece of information to reach a lot of people than a true piece of information, which is incredibly concerning. And the object of this study, the accountability in algorithmic decision-making that was published by Dr. Diakopoulos from Georgia Tech in the monthly magazine Association for Computer Machinery. It's a very traditional publication. And the ideal model, he concludes, is we need to involve humans and machines. And as I head toward the end of my presentation, this is something that I think we should really think about, because it increasingly looks like the future will be composed of centaurs, right? The combination of an artificial being playing on its strengths and human beings playing in our strengths. So if you look at the famous chess challenge between IBM Big Blue and Kasparov, where Big Blue effectively won. If you take the following chapters of this incredible history, as Kasparov teamed up with smart algorithms, you could see a completely different dynamic in the outcome of matches. And it feels like this could be a blueprint for the future, where humans and machines, they feed off each one's strengths. So we live in a world where there are a lot of entities trying to crack the deep fake problems, not only when it comes to words and sound bites, but images too. We can see here some examples, always on the left-hand side, the real image, and then the right-hand side, the fake image. Sometimes this is built for good or for artistic purposes, like the Princess Leia digital simulacrum for Rogue One. But sometimes it's used for evil purposes, when you try to take someone that is very respected and well-known and you try to put words in their mouths and you spread that as fact and not lies, right? Not only that, technology can bring you even a step further and can make you go and use art and animate people that didn't exist in video. There's no record of La Gioconda being filmed, right? We just have the one painting, and you can take that painting and AI can actually articulate and make it talk, make it sing, make it change expressions. You can make Salvador Dali make faces and expressions that he never made before, and so on and so forth. And these are challenges that are being tackled now by both academic professionals and technology companies. So at the end of the day, our challenge here is to be mindful of the importance of the tool set, the toolkit that we have been offered with AI, the possibilities that it has to greatly improve the quality of lives of society, but also the incredible dangers that the misuse of these techniques could bring to all of us as a society. So thank you very much for your time, for your attention, and for the invitation to be a part of this panel. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Guy Perelmuter, Professor Guy Perelmuter from Rio de Janeiro, for your presentation as well. A small anecdote, it is said and known that Charles Chaplin, once he took part in a kind of Charles Chaplin impersonation contest that was back in the 50s, and it's said that he arrived in fourth. So we have a kind of deep fake embedded the human cognitive system that underlays the revolution of AGI and STI that came forward. That's a kind of anecdote. And thank you very much precisely for your statement of the dangers of predictions and how those predictions, when we are in the realm of artificial narrow intelligence, that's fine. So self-driving cars, phones, email spam filters, so this is something. But when we leap it to artificial general intelligence and even to super intelligence in the future, how are we going to be submitted, judged, chosen, assessed? So this is real danger, and we have to put curbs on that way of leaping from one lane of the road to superintelligence to the other. So it was very clear representation from that. Thank you so much. So we have here our last speaker of today, Professor Esther Colombini. She is a professor of robotics and artificial intelligence at Unicamp, University of Campinas, and she is also from the Technological Institute of Aeronautics, ITA, in São José dos Campos, Brazil. And most importantly, I think for the purposes of today's roundtables, that she's the coordinator of the Laboratory of Robotics and Cognitive Systems at the same Unicamp. So with great pride and pleasure and honor that we have you, Professor Colombini, please, your presentation.
Thank you so much, Professor Ademar. Thank you all. Thanks for the invitation. It's great to have the opportunity to discuss such relevant aspects of AI and their impact in society. So I'd like first to, I think all the three panelists that came before me, they talked about something that is really important to our hearts nowadays. That's the idea of discussing like how can we understand what is truth, how can we use AI to bring society to a better level. And I would like to start talking about using these references to first of all understand that, remember to all of us that fake news, for instance, and the truth, the false information is not news. Like when the Greeks, they presented the Troy's horse to the people of Troy and spread out that it was a gift from the gods, it was gossip, and it was the fake news, the spread of fake news that led to the breakout of an empire. And but what has changed with the society and what has been different for a long period is that although there are a lot of fake news around, and although we are all the time we are surrounded by false information. Since the 11th century, when the University of Bologna was founded, the pursuit of truth was delegated and become the mission of academics, the university, and the scientific community in the world. So indeed, truth has become, since then, the result of rich discussion, public disclosure, and social agreement. So Earth is round, vaccines work, and the man has been to the moon is not my opinion, is the agreement of studies and the results of research and the result of technology that has been conducted. However, nowadays, and AI has some influence around it, but we have a lot of conditions that are making hard for us to prevent the consequence of this, what seems a post-truth era that we are living on. So we have a wide availability of data. We live in a world where we have to abstract most of our knowledge to just pass by. Like, we drive cars that we don't know how they actually work. We eat food that we don't know how has been processed, because we can't have all the knowledge that is needed in a society that is so advanced. So our impossibility to process all the data with the necessary background to understand it, and the possibility to use technology to share facts, or what they call facts, the presence of these algorithms that are faking the truth or are creating images that seem true, but they are not. They are just deep fake information, are becoming, creating a reality that is hard for us to distinguish what is and to agree what is truth and what is not. About a year ago, I heard a professor from philosophy saying that it's almost like we are in a schizophrenic state, because we watch programs of people cooking food, but we've never eaten this amazing food. We visit amazing beaches without ever leaving home. So our senses are getting deceived all the time because we understand reality by our senses. And now we are in such a situation that we don't know, because we live a reality that is not actually perceived by our senses in the traditional way that we have been as human beings around. So in this sense, although AI methods can derive deceitful information, as many of you have showed, they can also be our only way in this very complex scenario to restate the truth. Like, we don't have the power to process, for instance, like, as the world is getting a digital transformation, governments are being obliged to release their documents online. You can read which person has spent a specific amount of money to travel from one city to the other, mainly if they are public workers. We have all this information usually available, but it's impractical for us and unfeasible to pay people or to delegate this processing of information to human beings. So if we could use AI not only to in the bad way that people are used to think about AI, but to use AI methods to help us restate the truth, to gain knowledge about what is going on in the world, we might be able to reclaim our power in terms of what should be really put to the society. But this is not an easy statement. It seems like a long-term goal, but we require global commitment right now. I think that we most of our discussions are trying to say that we need state policies, we need data protection, we need accountability. So if an AI model is being deceitful, it's not the AI model itself. There is someone pressing the button, there is someone training the model, and we do need to make people accountable for their decisions. And we need to educate people, because if you are not educated, we don't know how these algorithms can mess with our minds. So I think it's quite important for us to reapproach the link between, and I think we are quite in this moment now, to approach the link between the technological sciences, AI, and philosophy, the social humanities, and social sciences, because without the understanding of the consequences of the power of these models and how they can be used wrongly. It's not about the models itself, but how they can be used. We might not be able to deal with the impacts of this in society. So ethics discussion, it's becoming ever more relevant in AI, in the AI roundtables. The discussion around ethics, how can we protect our data, but how can we make better use of our data? We all know, it's quite clear for us as researchers in the AI community, the power of good that AI can bring to the world. We know that AI can help us detect and prevent a problem with weather. We know that AI can help us detect diseases even years before they can happen. We know that AI can help us to understand if there is a plague in a specific region in our agriculture. So we know that we can advance the world using AI. But the problem is that we can also, it can also, as powerful as it is, it can also be used in the wrong way. So although for us as researchers, it's quite clear the benefits that we have in AI, I think the AI community in the world has now the obligation to bring these elements forward. And I think that we are getting even more aware every day, because the more successful AI methods are getting of learning from data, we are seeing the results of inequality in society through the eyes of the AI models. You've said before here, my colleagues mentioned that it's not about the model. It's not the model that is unethical or that has a bias in terms of, it didn't choose to have a bias. It learns from data. And we live in a world that is unequal, in a world that there is gender bias, or that there are social differences, and these models are exposing these, are revealing these characteristics. So I think that in many ways, AI is helping us to see these harmful stereotypes, or to show us these harmful stereotypes. And we are, not because we are just good people, and I mean not just the researchers, but people are making efforts to mitigate these problems, because scientifically, bias systems are really bad. They are not able to generalize. We are not going to be able to get results. If I have a system that is able to detect, for instance, skin cancer, but it only works with people of white skin, or is trained only to, and it's only have a good performance with people white skin, I'm not achieving my goal in terms of the kind of model that I am trying to pursue or to create. So I think that the first fact is that if our systems are not able to generalize well, if their results are not are poor because of these biases, or this lack of seeing the truth and not what the data is showing to us, it's something that is quite relevant for the community, but also because ethically biased systems might harm people in many ways. So this is we see this all the time in society, and we are using the algorithms to reveal this also. So I understand that for instance, in my group, we have been working with natural language processing to detect gender bias or stereotypes in law decisions, with judicial decisions that are spread around the country that you can just download in the courts. But we can use AI not just to create new policies and to derive new policies, but also to validate them. For instance, imagine that I create a new court to assess a specific kind of legal problems. I can use AI to evaluate the results from this court and to assess the politics that has been defined, to say, okay, that's not working. We are creating even more bias or even more issues if you go that way. So I think that we can think an AI, and I like very much, I think it's a term that all of us have been using a lot, the idea of AI for good. in terms that for every problem that is being said to be created by AI systems, and it's not about them, it's about their wrongly being used by people, but we can fight these problems with the same AI. So I think that we are seeing an unprecedented creation of models, of algorithms that are being used to fight the wrongdoings of algorithms itself. So I think we can foresee in the next few years a lot of bad things being showed up just because these algorithms now are going to be able to detect. So I think in many ways, AI can help us. And I think that this is one of the points that I wanted to talk more. And it's to help us restate this state of truth that we have lost. I remember that I was looking to a sentence online, and it was like, in times of universal deceit, telling the truth will be a revolutionary act. And it was said to be written by George Orwell. And if you like George Orwell, if you read George Orwell, it seems like Orwell. It sounds like Orwell, but it's not Orwell. So how can we check this information? I think that with the amount of data that we have nowadays, only intelligent systems can help us doing this. So instead of thinking about them as harmful tools, I think they can help us prevent the misuse of all this information that is available. But as I've mentioned prior, we need commitment in politics to help us solving this. We all are aware of the results of these polls through and the deep fake news in the last elections, in Brexit, and not only in the UK or the United States, but also in Brazil. We know the impact of this spread of wrongdoing because we don't have time to reassess the truth after it has been spread out, and we need people educated to receive the truth as well. So they say that we have around 2.45 billion users, for instance, in Facebook, nowadays active users. Every 60 seconds, around, 150,000 photos are being uploaded, 500,000 comments are posted, and many other likes are doing. So big tech companies that has been mentioned here, they have information from the world in their hands, and they somehow have the power to designate what is truth and what is not, and to recognize it. So we see in this scenario that I mentioned, and I'm not saying that they are the evil, on the contrary, but we have to make people accountable and responsible for what they hold. So we are in the era of knowledge. Knowledge is more valuable than the oil, as my colleague said. And if we don't know how knowledge and how data can be used to generate knowledge to these companies that are going to keep the status quo of the world going on, we might not be able to change the great inequalities that we have in the world. So this digital footprint that we are living around, using our mobile phones everywhere, posting our information wherever you go, creating new data every minute, can help the world knowing us better in such a way that we'll be able to find a pattern that shows that you might be developing Alzheimer, at the same time that it can be used in the way that it understands you so well that it can use the knowledge against you. So I guess that the only way we can fight this is creating even more smart algorithms, and also creating public laws, and have specifications that say how this can be used, and how you're going to get accountable if you use it in the wrong way, what kind of penalty are going to receive, because many crimes can be committed now in this digital era, and they are really hard nowadays to find. So you can just ruin someone's reputation by posting a fake news about this person. And sometimes, because usually things in the internet, they are not written on pencil, they are written on ink. This will last forever, and it's going to be really hard to go back and to retain the truth. So I would like just to summarize, I think all the things that my previous colleague said, that is, I think that the power of the world nowadays is on knowledge and on this quest, and I think we are on this quest for algorithms and for laws and for commitments that are going to help us restate the truth in the world. And with COVID-19 and with the spread that vaccines are going to be harmful for people, when it's completely the contrary, we have an urgent necessity to spread knowledge and to show to people how relevant it is to check information and to make available tools that will help society see what is actually truth in the world. So I think as academics, as researchers, as politicians, is our duty now to use this and create these algorithms and study these algorithms and to research them, to restate our mission as academics, that is the search for truth in society. So I would like to summarize my thought with that. Thank you, Professor.
Thank you so much, Esther. Amazing, fabulous. Thank you so much for your enlightening presentation. It was really great, and your presentation represented precisely a new repertoire, we could say, to present a repertoire for the harnessing, the connection of the human sciences and artificial intelligence and computer science. In terms that I could say that when we say that we are surrounded by false information, the state of truth, this has been a phenomenon that as we say, society precedes technology and both presides public policy. So in this term, it's very important that we understand the social roots of this post-truth world and the advent of relativism, in which I am a social scientist from my side. So we see that all the basic concepts, the fundamental concepts, they are now at stake, they are being charged, they are being challenged, like the concept of community in itself. So how can we define a community in this truth aspect that we used to do? The belief systems, authority, social hierarchies, and most importantly, which your presentation brought about, was the value of knowledge in itself. So we all grew up with a very clear notion of the scientific method, the importance of science, the results and the output, the scientific method, epistemology. So now all of this is being challenged, and of course, academy and science has to resist, but the public perception of knowledge production is something that has to be done in different patterns when we apply and we interact between the social sciences and artificial intelligence. Thank you so much for that. I know that we have a number of questions. I think we have, in fact, what we did for the presenters and the panelists in this roundtable, we induced certain problems, certain issues, certain questions in which they develop and delve deeper, and now those are basically provocations for them to keep on. We also had presenting the apologies of Secretary Luís Lamb, and he had to leave a little bit earlier, and he advised us that he would be doing so. But whichever question is addressed to him, of course, we have direct contact with all his team and him personally, so we can direct and involve him in future debates and discussions that we are looking forward to that. So I think that we have our colleagues from AI2, which were in charge of collecting the certain questions. And I can have access to them from here, but if somebody else can just see the order in which they were presented so that we could begin. let me take a look, because I have to open here a different window and make sure that I have access to the intervention from the audiences. Let's see here. Yes. Yeah, we have here some of them. So one question is a kind of very practical one, empirical one, and I think it's quite interesting. The low-hanging fruits. Wait,
Ademar,
yes.
It's on the screen.
Yes,
they are starting to put the questions on the screen.
Oh, okay, that's right. Great, wonderful. So much better. All right, go ahead, please. That's fine. So, all right, what would be this Leno, I think from Rio, what would be the AI low-hanging fruits initiatives in Brazil? So, of course, the answer is very, well, I don't know, I don't consider if this roundtable is a low-hanging fruit, but a kind that's a very juicy and perhaps a flavored and a sweet fruit, hopefully, but it's a fruit in ways. And the first step of government and other institutions to do, should do, considering the current situation to promote AI in Brazil. So who would like to take over, please? The floor is open to whoever is interested, or can answer the question, please. Nobody?
I think the Center for AI in Brazil, the Center for AI that is now a partnership with University of São Paulo and IBM Research here in Brazil is one of the good initiatives. I know that Unicamp also has several other initiatives too. So, but I think the Center for AI is a very good initiative to promote this AI governance and the spread of AI and the new research of things that can help Brazil in AI, like agriculture, health, and other domains.
Yeah,
I would just add, yes, Esther, please.
No, just to add to Appel saying that it's indeed we have a lot of initiatives in the country. Like we've been organizing ourselves in centers, in communities. We have now open calls for different new formations of centers like those that IBM has stated with USP and other universities. And I think that this is causing awareness that we should treat AI as a government policy and not just like a work from each of individuals, of researchers. So I think that in some way we are trying to see that this is needed, and universities and startups and many other companies are organizing themselves to try to create this environment. Because as you've mentioned earlier, like 15 years ago, if we said that we are working on AI systems or robotic systems, people were saying, okay, you were working in some fantasy world or something like this. And now I understand that society knows what AI means, although sometimes in the wrong way. But as we are getting more and more knowledge about AI and this famous word now, we understand as society that we need to work with it. So I think there are many initiatives in the country right now.
Any other question? If not, I'll just, all right. Which economic niche, this is Thiago Feralchi, which economic niche artificial intelligence has a good opportunity here in Brazil? Economic niche. Well, I think this is a quite generic question, and I could say that everything, absolutely everything, but somebody would like perhaps to delve a little bit deeper in telling the possibilities of AI. I think not only in Brazil, but it can be applied to everywhere in which each and every aspect of economic activity. But I think that we have already answered this question. It's about, of course, all the, and we were talking, when we talk about economics, of course, we talk about society and the social benefits. So in biotechnology, in nanotechnology, in robotics, in advanced manufacturing, Industry 4.0, for instance, ocean sciences, aeronautics, automobile industry, and space, rare earth magnets, so whatever thing I think which are the good. So if I understood well, the question is what sector could be more advanced, and of course, computer science, which is the core basic research activity of the panelists here. It's a cross-cutting activity, cross-cutting discipline, which is at the very basis and foundation for the development of everything. And I just would add, for instance, the nature of bioinformatics, for instance. So this is whichever activity you can apply to that. And what the different thing is how we could equip ourselves in Brazil to have a kind of national strategy for development AI. I know that the Ministry for Science and Technology, they are establishing nine AI centers, which are planned for different parts of Brazil with certain specializations. And I think that a very important concept as well, I think this is really, really important and good, is the concept of innovation diplomacy, because artificial intelligence and all, say, sciences pertaining to the knowledge economy, contemporary knowledge economy, and an intangible economy, it will depend heavily on international cooperation and international exchange of knowledge and reverse innovation, cross innovation from several sources. So Brazil, I think, has a large pool of talent, a large pool of experiences, of good competitive firms and enterprises, and above all, we have the excellence of our academy. So, and this academy is more and more gearing towards cooperating with the private sector, and we are lagging behind. We know that we are well behind, lagging a lot behind in terms of innovation, but we are doing the right thing, in the right path, and we can estimate that this innovation diplomacy to make the economic fruits and benefits of research, particularly of AI, has a lot to do with international cooperation. And this is precisely what the universities are doing, and what centers like AI2 and C4AI are doing precisely, is launching big, huge international cooperation processes to absorb knowledge and to have an impact in the economic sector in Brazil. Do we have another question? See here. Yes, specifically to Ana Paula, coming from Heloisa Camargo. Do you think it would be more effective to focus on avoiding bias in the data, or should we go one step further and include procedures in the algorithms to identify biases? I think very interesting question, this one. Ana Paula, please.
I think we need to do everything that's possible to avoid the bias, no? Not just the data, because sometimes to avoid bias in the data, you need to, do a lot of procedures in the data, and sometimes like cut some attributes, for instance, but also in the models. And there is also researching doing to evaluate to how biased the model is. So we could, after the model is ready, there is some papers are read that you can evaluate if your model has some certain types of bias, and to evaluate the model after the training. So we need to include this in model also to do this. And with the advance of auto AI, you need to make sure that we have this not just in the pre-processing, that we know that's 80% of the work in data science is doing the pre-processing of the data, but also to, when you create these new features and training the model, you avoid certain types of routines or models to prevent the bias.
Mm-hmm. Right. João Paulo Berger. Whoever will, do you think we can look for changes in the West in way our democracy and state works, likewise Taiwan's digital democracy? Yeah, it's a question about basically e-government, which is interesting, and digital democracy in Taiwan. What are the prospects for that? Well, this is a quite tricky question, and anybody would like to risk? I know that Professor Guy Perelmuter is very quiet, he's very discreet. as he usually is, and trying to avoid, say, a hard time and a hard talk. But I think that I will try to hand over to him and see he can contribute in one of his thoughts about the relationship between AI and the democratic state and democracy.
Right. I think I should thank you for that, right? For that specific question. So again, as we have been discussing over the past couple of hours, the whole situation on how you're going to use data is always a challenge, right? And as much benefit we have seen in cities like Singapore and Taiwan and Barcelona in Spain that have made their data available so that public policies could be developed for safety, for environment, for traffic, for mobility. There's always the challenge on how we're going to handle this data. So I think that we will, it's unavoidable in today's world that all of us are leaving a digital footprint everywhere we go, right? We cannot help it anymore. This is not a question of not doing it anymore, or doing it. It's going to happen. As usual, the challenge is how we're going to use this data and how we can make sure that this data in its anonymized format can be helpful for the society as a whole. So I'm a big believer that as much as we can bring some of the logistical challenges of the physical world into the digital world to make people's lives easier, more safer, and more efficient, I'm all for that, right? If you look at an example even better than Taiwan, like Estonia, which is a country where basically you can do everything remotely, everything digital, from buying a house, from enrolling your kids at school, from voting, from making sure that all your accounts are in order. You have on the other end of the spectrum countries like Brazil, where out of 194 countries, we are number 189, I think, in terms of paying taxes. The complexity of paying taxes, the complexity of understanding exactly federal, state, and municipal laws and how they talk to each other and how they should be used in a more efficient way. So my take on your question is that we should definitely try to strive in that direction, but there's a long way to go. There are initiatives going on in Brazil to try to bring digital technology into the government and make the citizens, our life, society's life easier. But as with everything else regarding AI, it's a very, very, it's a two-sided challenge that we have to thread very carefully.
Thank you very much, Guy. Great. I think it's we wrapped it up nicely. We started a little bit with a little bit of delay, so we'll ask the audiences and the participants if you could stay another 5 minutes because we have 2 further questions. This is really amazing. So we have a flow of questions, and I'd like to cater for them the most we can. So let's go to the next one, and we'll have another 5-6 minutes. Lucas Avicius. That more knowledge society has about some subject, more participative it could be. And by gathering such participation, we might advance in a faster step that we are now. So it's a kind of correlation that he's trying to bring that, so this is the second one. No, we just brought the second one, all right. Could you go back to the first, because I don't know if it was quite clear to the previous question. Yeah, that's right, thank you. So is the question about the more knowledge we have in a society, the more participation we have. So this is bringing a kind of correlation. I don't see it clearly, but if you have some hints, to be more than welcome. Second one, please, the last question. How we could democratize AI in such a way to be more popular and get more attention, involvement, and ultimate financial support from governments and private companies? Yeah, good question as well. So who would like to take over? The first one, is there a correlation between the advancement of knowledge and participatory democracy? Anybody would like to have a try on that? I would refer to a book. There's a great book on this, precisely on this subject. It's Jürgen Habermas' 1962 book, Structural Changes in the Public Sphere. So he establishes in that study from they're talking about 6 years ago, almost 6 years ago, this study. What are the requisites for a good participatory democracy? So the formation of citizens, qualification of citizens, the involvement of discussions. Of course, you don't have computers, didn't have computer, anything like that at that time, but there were some basic configurations in which citizenship could be authentic, could be unencumbered, and could be unembarrassed. So what are the requisites for a good citizenship? So this book provides a lot of good answers in historical perspective. And but it's a difficult one to say that more knowledge encompasses better democracy and better participation. So the history, we're talking about, say, predicting the past. If we're talking about predictions, historians are very bad in even predicting the past many times. So we know that they have faced tremendous problems in societies which were advanced societies in terms of knowledge, in terms of scientific production, etc., which had some backlashes in that. And at the same time, some poorer. Of course, there is a kind of affinity, I would say, but not correlation between those two values. And the second and the last question that we have here is so the artificial intelligence outreach. So this, I think, is a very good point for all of you to have a final word on how we could, say, democratize artificial intelligence in our society, making kids. Before you answer, I'd just like to pay also make reference to the work of Professor Fernando Osório, who is a great disseminator and popularizer of artificial intelligence, and all his works and deep research that he does in several topics pertaining to that. And Professor Sérgio Novaes as well, they are both co-hosts here, has a very interesting element in his biography, which he published a book for kids, Elementary Structure of Matter, a charge in every school, which was distributed in 25,000 schools around Brazil. So those are the kinds of initiatives that are very good in enhancing scientific education and scientific literacy in Brazil. What are your views in that, and how you can help and cooperate with this endeavor? Say, Guy, Novaes, Ana, Bruno, so Esther, how can you add to this discussion? I will pick up Ana Paula. That's right. I was thinking of you.
I think Esther started to talk, so Esther, please go ahead.
No, it's okay. Okay. Now, I think that scientific dissemination is a must. So I think that we've all realized in the past few years that working with people, alongside with people, in showing what has been doing in terms of technological advances and research is mandatory. So sometimes in academics, we don't think that this is relevant, but it is, because as people get aware of that things are feasible, that they exist, more public incentives we have around it. I've been working with spread of robotics and AI in the past 15 years in the country through robotics Olympiads, scientific competitions. And for many years, people discussed this as something that was not as relevant as some specific research that we are doing in the university. But I think that is completely wrong, in the sense that if people do not get to know what we are doing and how this can make their lives better in any sense, we are losing the most powerful allies that we have, that is society. That is, in the end, the people that are going to pay for this research, the people that are going to use the results of this technological advancement. So I would say that the democratization and the spread of AI goes throughout doing things like that, talking to communities, say to people what AI is, and discussing the benefits and the problems that we might have with these algorithms. So for me, this is like a number one, although we have many other things to address.
Thank you, Esther. Ana Paula.
I agree with Esther. So we had an event on IBM last week, or the colloquium. That's a very traditional event. We have like this, a professor showing a research that people think that research didn't impact on their life. So we needed to spread what we are doing, to people start to believe again that research is important. So IBM this year released like this urgency of science, showing that especially in situations like we're living now, it's very important so we spread how science is important, and people start to believe again in science. So, and also the pandemic make this online event that I think that's a very good thing, and things that should continue even when we went back to the old normal life, because we can reach people in very far distance that didn't have access to these, or it's very hard to attend a presential event. So this is one way for us to communicate what we are doing, is showing how relevant are these, and how can this impact all the stuff that we're doing for the society and democratize artificial intelligence. So we spread the knowledge.
So, Guy Perelmuter, Professor Guy, please, you can close the seminar with your participation.
Thank you very much. So I think we should try to make sure that we realize that the time that it takes for research and a published paper to become an actual finished product that goes to the hands of the consumers is shrinking. This was measured by decades just a few years ago, and now we're beginning to see from first paper to patent to finished product, things like 24 to 36 months. So I think we should definitely make sure that Brazil is not so slow in issuing patents to its inventors. We are the slowest country in the world since the first deposit until the last acknowledgement of a specific patent. I think that we should make sure that universities have better mechanisms to be able to take their research, their intellectual property, and spread this research and spin it off to society and bring benefits to society, while at the same time making money out of it, with royalties, with intellectual rights, and so on and so forth. And finally, I think that we need to make sure that this tremendous paradox that we see in Brazil, where we have top publishing entities, some of the best universities, incredibly well-prepared people being driven away from the country instead of us attracting better talent to the country. We need to enable society to understand that what is happening now is these are the building blocks of the next decades of economic growth, of prosperity, of the way that mankind is really going to start shaping its next century. And I think Brazil has a lot of the right elements in order to do so, but we don't have the right framework. And I think this is critical for us to make sure that we can look at, those threats and contributions that we've talked about over the last couple of hours, and make sure that we have the right people, the right models, and the right reach to get them in the hands of those who need the most and that will benefit from them the most.
Thank you very much, Guy Perelmuter. Thank you very much, Ana Paula Appel, Esther Colombini, and also our Secretary, Luís Lamb, all of you. It's a great day that we had today. I only regret that I've been the moderator of this panel, not only for the enormous excellence of everyone which was involved, but I would like to be on the other side, just focusing on everything which has been said, taking careful notes, and learning much more than I did today. I would just hand to Professor Sérgio Novaes. Just to mention, I mentioned a very important publication of his, this elementary structure of matter, which was for kids, just for them to understand theoretical elementary particle physics, and it was written together as well with Professor Ronald Schellert, who is the director of the Brazilian Center for Physics Research in Rio de Janeiro. Sérgio, if you could just give us a kind of salute for us to close this wonderful, excellent morning session that we had.
Yes, let me just thank everybody for being here. I hope you can return sometime in the future, because we intend to keep discussing this issue. Just to make a bridge with what Guy mentioned, the people that issue the patents in Brazil looked for AI2 to try to construct via machine learning, artificial intelligence, a form that could avoid most of the problems of the submission of patents in Brazil. They say that this take 2 years, 10 years sometimes nowadays, and they can reduce that to 1/10 if you have a kind of smart form to be filled, avoiding some very naive mistakes that take 10 years for them to realize that there was a mistake in the submission and return to the point zero. So this is something that's really challenging, and we are looking forward to cooperate with them. So we thank you all, and we hope to have you in a future event. And we intend to keep doing this because from science, from the academia, up to the public policy, it's a long way, and Brazil has to wake up in this direction and do a little bit more than just open centers in the academia. We have to have a new approach to this. We have to have really a junction, a bridge between the academic sector and the private sector to put them aligned with the same philosophy. So thank you very much for everything, and I hope to have you in a future event. And for the attendance, I would like to remind that you can subscribe to the channel. This is a tradition to say that. So I'm trying to subscribe and wait for the next event. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Sergio, Ana, Guy, Esther. Thank you so much. Have a great afternoon for you too. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.